As they advanced deeper into the station, the sheer, cavernous emptiness began to play tricks on their senses, or perhaps, it was the absence of sensory input that allowed their minds to conjure phantoms. Eva found herself straining her ears, convinced she could detect a faint, almost melodic hum, a ghost of a melody that tugged at the edges of her memory, like a forgotten lullaby from her childhood. She dismissed it as fatigue, the ambient pressure changes and the sheer psychological weight of their surroundings. Then, Silas's voice, strained and tight, crackled over the comms, a sudden dissonance in the rhythmic hum of their journey. Did anyone else hear that? Eva's hand instinctively went to the sidearm holstered at her hip, her gaze sweeping the oppressive darkness ahead. "Hear what, Silas?" she asked, her voice deliberately calm, betraying none of the sudden prickle of unease that had crawled up her spine. "A voice." "A whisper," Silas replied, his tone heavy with a dread that seemed to seep from the very metal of the station, a premonition that went beyond the mere atmosphere of a derelict. "It sounded like my sister. Sarah." Anya let out a nervous, incredulous scoff. "Come on, Silas. It's the echo. This place is massive, sounds bounce around in weird ways. You're letting the quiet get to you." "No," Silas insisted, his voice gaining an edge of desperate conviction that was impossible to ignore. "It was her. I know her voice. She sounded like she was in trouble. Like she was calling for me." The unsettling nature of Silas's claim hung in the air, a chill that had nothing to do with the vacuum or the temperature. Eva felt a knot of disquiet tightening in her stomach. Silas was not prone to dramatics. He was a man of quiet resilience, a navigator who had charted courses through nebulae that would shred lesser ships and crews. If he heard something, it was real, or at least, it was real to him. And the thought of his sister, a name he rarely uttered, a profound loss that he carried like a shroud, being invoked in this desolate, silent place, it felt too specific, too coincidental, to be easily dismissed. "Silas," Eva said, her voice firm but modulated with a touch of gentleness, a leader's instinct to reassure while maintaining control. "We're all on edge. The void plays tricks on the ears. Keep your focus on the navigation. If you hear anything else, report it clearly, but don't let it distract you from bringing us through this." Jax, ever the pragmatist, chimed in, his gruffness a protective barrier against the encroaching strangeness. "Just static, Silas. Space plays tricks. We're all hearing things. Your brain's filling in the blanks. Now, where's that control center? I'm getting tired of walking in circles." Despite their reassurances, a seed of doubt had been planted, a tiny, insidious crack in their collective composure. The whispers, the faint metallic tang, the unnerving stillness that felt less like emptiness and more like watchful anticipation. Kalta Station was more than just an empty shell, it was a place that seemed to hum with an unseen energy, a place that was already beginning to probe at the edges of their sanity, reaching out with tendrils of the past, seeking to ensnare them in its silent, cosmic embrace. The promise of riches, once a blinding lure, felt increasingly distant, overshadowed by a growing, palpable sense of dread. This derelict was not merely dead, it was waiting, and in its waiting, it was stirring something within them. The corridor opened into a vast, circular chamber, clearly the station's primary control hub. Rows of consoles stretched out in a dizzying array, their screens dark and their surfaces covered in a fine layer of dust that seemed to absorb their helmet lights. The air here felt even more stagnant, carrying that persistent metallic tang that Eva now recognized as something more than just ambient residue. It was a scent that prickled the back of her throat, a faint, almost coppery aroma that felt wrong, alien. "Main control," Jax announced, his voice echoing slightly in the cavernous space. "Looks like it's all powered down." Typical. He approached a central console, his gloved hands hovering over the dormant interface. Still, there might be auxiliary power to some of the data cores. "Lena, see if you can get anything from these terminals." Lena was already at work, her scanner emitting a low, pulsing light as she attempted to interface with the dead systems. It's as if the power grid was intentionally purged, she murmured, her fingers tapping lightly against the cold, inert surface of a terminal. No residual energy signatures I can detect. It's as if the entire station's power was just switched on simultaneously. Anya, meanwhile, was methodically sweeping the periphery of the control room, her pulse rifle held at a low ready. Her movements were efficient, professional, but her helmet's comms occasionally picked up a sharp intake of breath, a subtle shift in her posture that spoke of unease. "Nothing but dust and shadows," she reported, her voice a little breathless. "No obvious points of entry or exit besides the main corridor. It's like a tomb within a tomb." Eva moved towards the central command chair, a throne of sorts, looking out over the silent expanse of consoles. The chair itself was empty, undisturbed. But as her light swept across it, she noticed something peculiar. On the armrest, faintly etched into the worn composite material, was a single, glowing handprint. It pulsed with a soft, internal luminescence, a stark contrast to the absolute darkness of its surroundings. It was a deep, almost iridescent blue, a color that seemed to absorb rather than reflect her light. "What the hell is that?" Eva breathed, leaning closer. Lena hurried over, her scanner immediately focusing on her. "That's impossible," she stammered, her scientific composure fraying at the edges. "There's no power source for that luminescence. It's emitting its own energy signature. And it's organic. Not entirely. It's a composite reading. Part biological, part something else. Something that doesn't fit any known energy spectrum." habit ingrained from years of analyzing alien atmospheres. There's a faint metallic tang, though. Almost coppery. Doesn't register on any of the standard atmospheric readings. Jax, ever pragmatic, waved a dismissive hand. Probably just old lubricants or residue from whatever they were mining. Let's keep moving. The sooner we find the control center, the sooner we can get a grip on this place. As they advanced deeper into the station, the silence began to play tricks on their senses. Or perhaps, it wasn't the silence itself, but what it allowed to surface. Eva found herself straining her ears, convinced she heard a faint, melodic hum, like a forgotten lullaby from her childhood. She dismissed it as fatigue, the strain of the decompression sequence. Then, Silas's voice, strained and tight, crackled over the cones. Did anyone else hear that? Hear what, Silas? Eva asked, her hand instinctively going to the sidearm holster of her neck. A voice. A whisper, Silas replied, his tone heavy with a dread that went beyond the mere atmosphere of the derelict. Sounded like my sister. Sarah. Anya scoffed nervously. Come on, Silas. It's the echo. The station's huge, sounds bounce around. No, Silas insisted, his voice giving an edge of desperation. It was her. I know her voice. She sounded like she was in trouble. The unsettling nature of Silas's claim hung in the air, a chill that had nothing to do with the vacuum. Eva felt a prickle of unease crawl up her spine. Silas was not prone to dramatics. If he heard something, it was real, or at least, it was real to him. And the thought of his sister, a name he rarely uttered, a tragedy he carried like a shroud, being invoked in this place, it was too much of a coincidence. Silas, Eva said, her voice firm but gentle. We're all on edge. Keep your focus. If you hear anything else, record it clearly. But don't let it distract you from navigation. Jax chimed in, his gruffness a protective layer. Just static, Silas. Space plays tricks. We're all hearing things. Now, where's that control center? Despite their reassurances, a seed of doubt had been planted. The whispers, the metallic tone, the unsettling stillness. Kalta Station was more than just an empty shell. It was a place that seemed to hum with an unseen energy, a place that was already beginning to probe at the edges of their sanity, reaching out with tendrils of the past, seeking to ensnare them in its silent, cosmic embrace. The promise of riches felt increasingly distant, overshadowed by a growing, palpable sense of dread. This derelict was not just dead, it was waiting. The outer hatch irised open with a muffled hiss, a sound swallowed almost instantly by the oppressive silence that permeated the derelict station. Eva's helmet lamp sliced through the absolute darkness, a focused beam of artificial sunlight revealing a cavernous corridor stretching into an abyss. Motes of dust, impossibly suspended in the vacuumless interior, danced in the light like spectral embers, giving the illusion of a frozen, breath-holding moment. The sheer scale of the station's interior was staggering. The corridor was a vast, industrial artery, lined with access panels and conduit junctions that disappeared into the oppressive gloom. Their lights played over surfaces that spoke of a life abruptly halted. Control panels, once humming with activity, were now dark, their screens blank and lifeless. Bulkheads bore the scars of what appeared to be emergency repair marks, hastily applied and long since faded, testament to some past crisis that had been met with a desperate, yet ultimately futile, response. They moved forward, their heavy, magnetized boots echoing softly on the grated decking, each step a jarring intrusion into the pervasive quiet. The sound seemed to dissipate unnaturally quickly, as if the very structure of the station was designed to absorb and nullify any noise. It was a silence that felt deliberate, a profound negation of sound that was far more unnerving than the expected stillness of a derelict. The only other audible sounds were the steady, reassuring hum of their suits' life support systems, a fragile bubble of familiar noise against the overwhelming stillness, and the equally unsettling sound of their own breathing, amplified within their helmets. Lena, ever the scientist, held her scanner aloft, its sensors sweeping the environment with a soft, ethereal glow. Her movements were slow, deliberate, her gaze darting from one detail to another, absorbing the frozen tableau of abandonment. She paused near what looked like a mess hall, a place designed for communal gathering and sustenance, now a shrine to absence. Tables were still set, their surfaces bearing the ghostly remnants of a final meal. Plates held semi-congealed nutrient paste, a grim testament to a crew that had vanished mid-consumption. A datapad lay open on one table, its screen cracked and shattered, forever frozen in the moment of its demise. Creepy, Anya's voice, a little too high and laced with an almost childlike apprehension, crackled over the comms. It's like everyone just evaporated. Poof. Lena's brow furrowed, a habit from years spent analyzing alien atmospheres and biological anomalies. She took a slow, deliberate breath within her helmet, the recycled air suddenly feeling cloying and alien. The preservation is remarkable, she stated, her voice measured, devoid of the fear that was beginning to creep into Anya's. No signs of explosive decompression, no indications of a struggle, no particulate residue from a violent event. It's as if they simply ceased to exist in situ. And there's a faint metallic tang in the air, almost coppery. It doesn't register on any of the standard atmospheric readings. It's anomalous. Jax, his heavy boots clomping with a decisive rhythm, waved a dismissive hand, the gesture amplified by the bulky suit. Probably just old lubricants or residue from whatever they were mining, he grumbled, his pragmatism a welcome anchor against the rising tide of unease. Let's keep moving. The sooner we find the control center, the sooner we can get a grip on this place and figure out what happened. As they advanced deeper into the station, the sheer, cavernous emptiness began to play tricks on their senses, or perhaps, it was the absence of sensory input that allowed their minds to conjure phantoms. Eva found herself straining her ears, convinced she could detect a faint, almost melodic hum, a ghost of a melody that tugged at the edges of her memory, like a forgotten lullaby from her childhood. She dismissed it as fatigue, the ambient pressure changes and the sheer psychological weight of their surroundings. Then, Silas's voice, strained and tight, crackled over the comms, a sudden dissonance in the rhythmic hum of their journey. Did anyone else hear that? Eva's hand instinctively went to the sidearm holstered at her hip, her gaze sweeping the oppressive darkness ahead. Hear what, Silas? She asked, her voice deliberately calm, betraying none of the sudden prickle of unease that had crawled up her spine. A voice. A whisper, Silas replied, his tone heavy with a dread that seemed to seep from the very metal of the station, a premonition that went beyond the mere atmosphere of a derelict. It sounded like my sister. Sarah. Anya let out a nervous, incredulous scoff. Come on, Silas. It's the echo. This place is massive, sounds bounce around in weird ways. You're letting the quiet get to you. No, Silas insisted, his voice gaining an edge of desperate conviction that was impossible to ignore. It was her. I know her voice. She sounded like she was in trouble. Like she was calling for me. The unsettling nature of Silas's claim hung in the air, a chill that had nothing to do with the vacuum or the temperature. Eva felt a knot of disquiet tighten in her stomach. Silas was not prone to dramatics. He was a man of quiet resilience, a navigator who had charted courses through nebulae that would shred lesser ships and crews. If he heard something, it was real, or at least, it was real to him. And the thought of his sister, a name he rarely uttered, a profound loss that he carried like a shroud, being invoked in this desolate, silent place, it felt too specific, too coincidental, to be easily dismissed. Silas, Eva said, her voice firm but modulated with a touch of gentleness, a leader's instinct to reassure while maintaining control. We're all on edge. The void plays tricks on the ears. Keep your focus on the navigation. If you hear anything else, report it clearly, but don't let it distract you from bringing us through this. Jax, ever the pragmatist, chimed in, his gruffness a protective barrier against the encroaching strangeness. Just static, silence. Space plays tricks. we're all hearing things. Your brain's filling in the blanks. Now, where's that control center? I'm getting tired of walking in circles. Despite their reassurances, a seed of doubt had been planted, a tiny, insidious crack in their collective composure. The whispers, the faint metallic tang, the unnerving stillness that felt less like emptiness and more like watchful anticipation. Kalta Station was more than just an empty shell. It was a place that seemed to hum with an unseen energy, a place that was already beginning to probe at the edges of their sanity, reaching out with tendrils of the past, seeking to ensnare them in its silent, cosmic embrace. The promise of riches, once a blinding lure, felt increasingly distant, overshadowed by a growing, palpable sense of dread. This derelict was not merely dead, it was waiting, and in its waiting, it was stirring something within them. The corridor opened into a vast, circular chamber, clearly the station's primary control hub. Rows of consoles stretched out in a dizzying array, their screens dark and their surfaces covered in a fine layer of dust that seemed to absorb their helmet lights. The air here felt even more stagnant, carrying a persistent metallic tang that Eva now recognized as something more than just ambient resin. It was a scent that prickled the back of her throat, a faint, almost coppery aroma that felt wrong and alien. Main control, Jackson announced, his voice echoing slightly in the cavernous space. Looks like it's all powered down. Typical. He approached the central console, his gloved hands hovering over the dormant interface. Still, there might be auxiliary power to some of the main cores. Lena, see if you can get anything from these terminals. Lena was already at work, her scanner remaining low, pulsing light as she attempted to interface with the dead systems. It's as if the power grid was intentionally purged, she murmured, her fingers tapping lightly against the cold, inert surface of the terminal. No residual energy signatures I can detect. It's as if the entire station's power was just switched on. Simultaneously. Anya, meanwhile, was methodically sweeping the periphery of the control room, her pulse rifle held in low level. Her movements were efficient, professional, but her helmet's comms occasionally picked up a sharp intake of breath, a subtle shift in her posture that spoke volumes. Nothing but dust and shadows, she reported, her voice a little breathless. No obvious points of entry or exit besides the main corridor. It's like a tomb within a tomb. Eva moved towards the central command chair, a throne of sorts, looking out over the silent expanse of consoles. The chair itself was empty, undisturbed. But as her light swept across it, she noticed something peculiar. On the armrest, faintly etched into the worn composite material, was a single, glowing handprint. It pulsed with a soft, internal luminescence, a stark contrast to the absolute darkness of its surroundings. It was a deep, almost iridescent blue, a color that seemed to absorb rather than reflect her light. What the hell is that? Eva breathed, leaning closer. Lena hurried over, her scanner immediately focusing on the handprint. That's impossible, she stammered, her scientific composure framed in the edges. There's no power source for that luminescence. It's emitting its own energy signature. And it's organic. Not entirely. It's a composite reading. Part biological, part something else. Something that doesn't fit any known energy spectrum. As Lena spoke, the handprint seemed to pulse brighter, its blue glow intensifying for a fleeting moment. Eva felt a strange sensation, a faint warmth emanating from the print, as if it were reacting to her presence, or perhaps to her touch. She resisted the urge to reach out, a primal instinct screaming caution. This was not just a derelict, it was something else, something that defied logical explanation. The silence of the void had always been vast and empty. But here, in Kalta Station, the silence was becoming something else entirely. It was becoming a presence. And its first whispers were beginning to touch them, not through sound, but through a disturbing, unnatural stillness that suggested observation, a predatory awareness lurking just beyond the reach of their lights. The true horror of Kalta Station was not its emptiness, but what it was beginning to reveal within that emptiness, and within themselves. The vast chamber of the control room, moments before a silent monument to a long-dead crew, now seemed to hum with a more insidious energy. The handprint, a vibrant splash of alien luminescence against the muted tones of the station, remained fixed on the armrest of the command chair, a silent, enigmatic beacon. Eva, her gaze still locked on the glowing imprint, felt a subtle shift in the air, an almost imperceptible pressure that wasn't physical, but psychological. It was the feeling of being observed, not by eyes, but by something far more pervasive. "Anything, Lena?" Eva asked, her voice deliberately cutting through the growing unease. She tore her gaze away from the handprint, forcing herself to focus on the task at hand. The station was a puzzle, and for now, the prize, the potential salvage, outweighed the growing sense of dread. Lena, her face illuminated by the soft glow of her skin, shook her head. "The energy signature is unlike anything I've ever encountered. It's fluctuating, almost breathing. And it's definitely localized to that handprint. No radiation, no detectable biological decay markers, yet it's undeniably active." She zoomed in on a reading, her brow furrowed in concentration. "It's almost as if it's absorbing ambient energy. Not just light, but something else. Something I can't quantify." Jax, having finished his sweep of the room, approached the central console, his heavy boots crunching on the fine layer of dust. He leaned in, his helmet lamp casting sharp shadows across the dormant screens. "So, the main power's dead. Auxiliary power's dead. And we've got a glowing, possibly sentient, handprint on the captain's chair. Just another Tuesday, I guess." His attempt at levity fell flat, the tension in the room too thick to dissipate with a joke. Anya, her rifle still held at a ready position, circled the perimeter again, her light beams dancing across the bulkheads and access panels. Her breathing, amplified within her helmet, seemed to hitch slightly. "It's quiet," she reported, her voice tight. "Too quiet. I can almost hear my own blood pounding." Then, it started. Faint, almost imperceptible at first, like the rustling of phantom paper or the whisper of wind through a vacuum, which was, of course, impossible. Eva strained her ears, her trained instincts immediately kicking in. It wasn't the hum of the life support, nor the creak of stressed metal, which would have been normal for a derelict. This was different. A layered, diffuse sound, just at the edge of audibility. What was that? Silas's voice, suddenly sharp and strained, cut through the comms. It was the same edge of dread Eva had heard before, amplified now, laced with a raw terror that made her stomach clench. "Did you hear that?" It sounded like her again. Eva turned towards Silas's position, a knot of apprehension tightening in her chest. "Silas, what are you hearing?" she asked, her voice calm but her mind racing. The hallucination theory was still plausible, but Silas's distress felt too genuine, too visceral. "My sister, Eva," Silas replied, his voice a ragged whisper that seemed to echo the very emptiness of the station. "Sarah. She's calling for me. She sounds so scared. She's saying, 'Help me, Silas. I'm trapped.'" A choked sob, quickly stifled, came through the comms, followed by a ragged intake of breath. "It's her. I know it's her." Anya scoffed, a sharp, disbelieving sound. "Silas, you're freaking out. We all are. It's the quiet, the stress. Your brain's filling in the blanks with what it wants to hear, or what it fears the most." "No." Silas's voice was a broad cry of anguish. "It's not like that. This is different. It's like she's right here. I can almost see her. In the shadows. Just for a second. Her hair, the way she used to brush it back, he trailed off, his breathing loud. Jax's voice, a low growl, Cut it out, Silas. We don't have time for this. We need to focus on finding the primary data core and getting her away. This is a salvage operation, not a therapy session. But even knew Silas. He wasn't one for dramatics. His sister, Sarah, had died years ago from a shuttle accident. He rarely spoke of her, and grief was a quiet, constant companion. For him to claim he was hearing her, and so vividly, was a red flag the size of a nebula. Silas, Eva said, her voice firm but laced with genuine concern. Breathe. Just take a moment. We're all a little on edge. Lena, keep scanning. Anya, keep an eye on Silas. Jax, let's try to access that console again. Maybe there's a manual override somewhere. As Eva's attention was divided, another sound, fainter this time, brushed against her own auditory senses. It was a woman's voice, soft and melodic, singing a lullaby. A lullaby her mother used to sing to her when she was a child, a song she hadn't thought of in decades. It was so fleeting, so ethereal, that she almost dismissed it as her own mind playing tricks. But the sheer clarity, the emotional resonance of it, sent a shiver down her spine and had nothing to do with the cold of space. Did anyone hear that? Eva asked, her voice barely a whisper. Anya's response was immediate, laced with a growing hysteria. Yes. Yes, I heard it. It sounded like my little brother, Leo. He was singing. He's gone, Eva. Leo's gone. Her voice cracked, the professional facade crumbled. Jack swore under his breath. This is getting out of hand. We're all hearing things. It's the isolation, the enclosed space, the sheer deadness of this place. It's messing with our heads. Lena, however, looked up from her scanner, her eyes wide behind her helmet's visor. It's not just audio, she stated, her voice trembling slightly. My readings are showing anomalous energy fluctuations, consistent with localized auditory phenomena. It's not just static or echoes. The energy patterns are complex. Almost like they're trying to mimic specific vocal frequencies. The implications of Lena's words were chilling. This wasn't just a case of frayed nerves. Something within Kalta Station was actively projecting these sounds, these voices. And they were targeting their deepest vulnerabilities, their most cherished memories, their most painful losses. My father, Silas whispered, his voice hoarse with despair. I heard my father. He sounded so disappointed. Saying I'd failed him, just like I always did. Then, Eva heard it again. Not a lullaby this time, but a clear, sharp command. Eva, report to the bridge. Immediate assistance required. It was Captain Cade's voice, the original captain of the Kalta Station, the man who had vanished along with his entire crew. It was the same authoritative tone, the same slight rasp she remembered from the station's archived logs. But it was laced with an urgency that was terrifyingly real. Captain Cade? Eva breathed, her hand instinctively going to her side-eye. She scanned the dark corners of the control room, her senses on high alert. What? Cade? Jax's voice was sharp, laced with disbelief. You're hearing Cade now. This is insane. It was him, Eva insisted, her heart pounding against her ribs. He was calling me to the bridge. There's something happening. No, there isn't. Anya shrieked, her voice cracking. There's nothing happening but us losing our minds. I heard Leo again, Eva. He's crying. He says he's cold. The cacophony of voices, real or imagined, began to swirl around them, each one a carefully crafted barb, designed to pierce their defenses. Silas was weeping openly now, muttering his sister's name. Anya was hyperventilating, her breaths coming in short, desperate gasps. Jax was grumbling curses, his pragmatism battling the rising tide of fear. Lena, ever the scientist, was trying to rationalize the inexplicable. The station's architecture, its extensive, vast resonant cavities, and the materials used in its construction, they could amplify and distort sound in unpredictable ways. Perhaps there's a harmonic resonance we're not accounting for. Harmonic resonance doesn't sound like my dead sister, Lena, Silas choked out, his voice thick with tears. The whispers intensified, no longer just faint echoes, but distinct phrases, insidious suggestions. You left them behind, Eva. You should have stayed, Anya. You're not good enough, Silas. Another failure, Jax. Each voice was tailored, hitting them where they were most vulnerable, digging into old wounds, dredging up buried guilt. Eva felt a prickle of fear, but also a flicker of defiance. She remembered the survival training. When faced with psychological warfare, the key was to maintain focus, to anchor yourself in reality. We are not hearing these voices, she said, her voice amplified, cutting through the rising hysteria. This is the station. It's trying to break us. It's feeding on our fear. But it sounds so real, Anya sobbed, her helmet's comms crackling with her distress. Leo. It's a trick, Anya. Eva snapped, trying to inject as much authority into her voice as possible. A very elaborate, very cruel trick. Silas, Anya, you need to try and tune it out. Focus on your suit readouts. Focus on the task. But the voices weren't just in their ears anymore. They were beginning to manifest in her peripheral vision. Fleeting glimpses of loved ones, standing just beyond the pool of their helmet lights, their faces etched with sorrow or accusation. Silas swore he saw Sarah's fleeting outline in a dark alcove. Anya gasped, claiming she saw Leo's spectral form beckoning her from a shadowed doorway. Eva herself thought she caught a glimpse of her mother's worried face in the reflection of the dark console screen, her lips moving silently. The psychological assault was relentless, expertly crafted. The station wasn't just a derelict, it was a predator, and its prey were their minds, their very identities. The salvagers, drawn by the promise of riches, had stumbled into a trap far more insidious than anything they could imagine. They were isolated, adrift in a sea of silence that was now filled with the echoes of their deepest regrets. The whispers in the corridors of the Kalta Station were not just sounds, they were the harbingers of a new war, a psychological unraveling threatening to consume them from the inside out. The sanctity of their own minds had been breached, and in this fast, mentality too, their sanity was the first casualty. The mission had irrevocably shifted from salvage to survival, and the fight for their minds had just begun. The silence was no longer empty, it was alive, and it was speaking their own private hells back to them. The air in the control room, thick with the dust of ages and the prickle of unidentifiable energies, seemed to press in on Jax. He knelt before the main console, his gloved fingers tracing the contours of the dead interface. The flickering lights of his helmet cast long, dancing shadows that seemed to mock his attempts to bring order to the chaos of Kalta Station. He'd found the emergency log access point, a small, recessed panel usually protected by a biometric lock. Thankfully, the station's primary security had been utterly compromised, leaving it vulnerable. The panel hissed open with a puff of stale air, revealing a single, intact data crystal. Got something, he grunted into the comms, his voice rough with exertion and a growing sense of unease. He slotted the crystal into his wrist-mounted reader, a small screen flaring to life. Captain Cade's name appeared, stark and official, followed by a series of timestamps. The first few entries were standard operational reports, dry and factual, detailing atmospheric controls, minor hull breaches, and crew rotations. But as Jack scrolled deeper, the tone began to shift, subtly at first, then with unnerving rapidity. Log entry 47 down, Jack's read aloud, his voice carried the weight of Cade's original words. Crew morale remains high, despite the extended isolation. Supplies are adequate. No anomalies to report. Captain Cade. He paused, his brow furrowed. Sounds routine enough. But then... he scrolled again. Log entry 48 Alpha. Disturbing reports from Sector Gamma. 2 technicians, Davies and Thorne, have gone missing. No signs of forced entry, no distress calls. Their quarters are undisturbed. As if they simply ceased to exist. Stellar. Jax muttered, the grim humor failing to mask the chill that was beginning to creep into his bones. This place is already giving me the creeps. He continued to read, the entries becoming shorter, more fragmented. Cade's meticulous reports devolved into frantic scribbles, his professionalism eroding with each passing log. Log entry 48 Beta. Another disappearance. Engineer Anya Sharma. Vanished from the cargo bay during a routine inventory check. The security feeds, they're corrupted. Just static. This is not a coincidence. He's starting to sound like us, Jax observed, his gaze sweeping the silent, empty control room. He felt a strange kinship with the long-dead captain, a shared descent into the abyss of the unknown. Then came the entry that made Jax's blood run cold. Log entry 48 Delta. I can't sleep. The whispers, they're getting louder. I see them in the shadows. They're watching me. The crew. They're not themselves. There's a change in them. A vacant look. They whisper things I don't understand. They talk of the emptiness. Of becoming one with it. He's losing it, Jax breathed, his own mental fortitude beginning to fray. He understood the isolation, the psychological toll of deep space. But Cade's words spoke of something far more sinister, something that crawled under the skin. The final entry was a jumble of raw terror. Jax hesitated before reading it, a primal instinct warning him to turn back. But his mission was to uncover the truth, however grim. He took a deep breath, and the reader projected Cade's final transmission onto the console's main screen, a distorted audiovisual nightmare. Log entry 48 Epsilon, Jax began. Cade's voice, now a strained rasp, filled the comms. They're here. Not the crew. Something else. It's wearing their faces. It's in the walls. It's in the silence. It's... oh God, it's in me. The audio feed devolved into a strangled cry, a sound of pure, unadulterated agony, abruptly cut short by a deafening blast of static and a gut-wrenching shriek that seemed to claw at their very souls. The screen went black, leaving only the ghost of Cade's terror imprinted on their minds. Jax recoiled, his breath catching in his throat. That scream, it was the sound of a mind being irrevocably shattered. He felt a phantom echo of it reverberate through his own skull, a primal, animalistic terror that made him want to bolt from the station and never look back. What the hell was that? Anya's voice, sharp with alarm, cut through the comms. She was still on perimeter sweep, her own fear palpable. Cade's final log, Jax replied, his voice tightened. He heard something. Saw something. Disappearances, paranoia, and then that scream. The log just cuts out. Meanwhile, across the vast, echoing expanse of Kalta Station, Lena was engrossed in her own unsettling discoveries. Her scanner, a marvel of xenobiological analysis, had been diligently sifting through the station's bioresidue, searching for any trace of the missing crew. What she found, however, defied every known principle of biology. Eva, Jax, Anya, Silas, Lena's voice was a hushed whisper, tinged with a scientific awe that was slowly being eclipsed by dread. She was in what appeared to be a secondary laboratory, the air thick with the faint, acrid scent of long-dead reagents. I'm detecting anomalous biological signatures. They're pervasive. Embedded within the station's very structure, air circulation, even the water reclamation systems. Eva, still trying to process the horror of Cade's final message, focused her attention on Lena. Anomalous how Lena. Microbes. Fungal growth. No, Lena's response was immediate. Her voice gained an almost feverish intensity. It's fluid. The cellular structures are organized. They're not stable. They're reconfigured. Adapting. They shift between what appears to be simple organic compounds and incredibly complex, almost crystalline nonsense. It's like nothing I've ever encountered. It defies classification. It's alive, but not in any way we understand it. She continued her analysis, her scanner projecting a holographic display of swirling thermal films. See here, she directed Eva. This segment was initially identified as a protein chain. Minutes later, it's reorganized into a complex energy conduit. The energy signature is faint, but it's there. It's almost as if the station itself is a single, massive, biomechanical organism, constantly rebuilding itself at a cellular level. Jax, overhearing Lena's report, chimed in. So, we've got ghost screams, disappearing people, and a station that's apparently eating itself from the inside out. Just another day in the cold. His attempt at gallows humor was met with a tense silence. It was Anya who broke the quiet, her voice laced with a new kind of unease. Wait. Lena, what's that like? Her helmet lamp swung towards a section of the boat, illuminating the faint, pulsating luminescence. It emanated from a sealed access point, a section of the station, according to the schematics Jax had managed to pull up, led to a series of maintenance conduits and atmospheric processors. The light was subtle, a soft, otherworldly glow that seemed to seep from the metal itself. Lena directed her scanner towards the area. Fascinating, she murmured, her scientific curiosity piqued despite the mountain water. The luminescence is tied to the energy readings I'm getting. It's a low-level, coherent photonic emission. Very unusual. It's not heat-based, nor is it a standard radiation signature. It's alien. The sealed panel, usually unremarkable, now seemed to hum with a hidden energy. The faint light pulsed rhythmically, a silent, hypnotic invitation. It drew their attention, a beacon in the oppressive darkness of the derelict. Unbeknownst to them, this unassuming section of the station held the key to the true nature of the terror that had befallen Kalta Station. The whispers, the disappearances, the shifting biology, it was all connected, a tapestry of cosmic horror woven into the very fabric of the ship. They were drawn to the light, unaware that it was not a source of salvation, but the heart of the darkness itself. Eva, her mind racing to piece together the fragments of information, felt a prickle of dread mixed with an uncharacteristic surge of scientific curiosity. The handprint on the command chair, Cade's descent into madness, Lena's impossible biological findings, and now this strange luminescence, they were all pieces of a puzzle that was rapidly coalescing into a horrifying picture. Lena, can you get that panel open? She asked, her voice firm, though a tremor ran beneath it. I'm working on it, Lena replied, her scanner whirring as she attempted to bypass the archaic locking mechanism. The power grid to this section is completely offline, but the luminescence suggests an internal energy source. It's remarkably resilient. As Lena worked, Silas, who had been largely silent since Cade's final log, spoke up, his voice a ragged whisper. Eva, that light. It's like the light I saw. Before Sarah was taken. His voice cracked with the raw pain of memory, a pain that echoed the growing unease in the station. The ethereal glow was a painful reminder of his past, a past he couldn't escape. Eva's heart ached for Silas. We'll get to the bottom of this, Silas, she said, trying to project a confidence she didn't entirely feel. Whatever this is, we'll face it together. Jax, ever the pragmatist, was already considering their next move. If this is some kind of derelict alien tech, it could be worth a fortune. But if it's responsible for what happened to Cade's crew, well, that's a whole other matter. His avarice was tempered by a healthy dose of fear, a dangerous combination in this haunted place. Lena's triumphant exclamation broke the tense silence. Got it. The panel is open. A hiss of escaping atmosphere, carrying with it a faint, sweet scent that was unsettlingly familiar, filled the air. The luminescence intensified, spilling out from the open panel like a liquid dawn, casting an eerie, ethereal glow into the corridor. The opening revealed not conduits, but a small, circular chamber, perfectly preserved and eerily pristine. Unlike the rest of the station, untouched by dust or decay, this chamber seemed to be in a state of suspended animation. And at its center, suspended in what appeared to be a shimmering, gelatinous substance, were things. Lena's scanner immediately went wild, spitting out incomprehensible data. My God, she breathed, her voice laced with disbelief. The readings, they're off the charts. This chamber, it's generating its own localized temporal field, that's why it's so preserved. And the substance, it's not organic, not inorganic. It's a nexus of pure energy. And the entities within, they're not biological. They're formed light. Solidified energy. Their cellular structure, it's impossible. It's like they're simultaneously existing in multiple dimensions. Eva, Jax, Anya, and Silas converged on the opening, their helmet lights cutting through the pulsing glow. They peered into the chamber, their breath catching in their throats. The entities were abstract, fluid forms of pure luminescence, their shapes constantly shifting, reforming, like living nebulae. They seemed to writhe and pulse with an inner light, their movements slow, deliberate, and utterly alien. They're beautiful, Anya whispered, a sense of wonder momentarily overriding her fear. Beautiful and deadly, Anya, Jax corrected, his hand tightening on the sidearm. What are they, Lena? Lena adjusted her scanner, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and exhilaration. I don't know. But the energy signature, it's similar to the one I detected on the command chair's armrest. And the biological anomalies, the shifting cellular structures, they're all part of this. This, light. It's not just emitting energy, it's transmitting matter. It's rewriting reality at a fundamental level. Silas, his gaze fixed on the shimmering forms, suddenly flinched back. The light, he stammered, his voice filled with a dawn hope. It's the same light I saw. When they took me. It was all around me. Then, nothing. Eva felt a cold red seep into her. Silas' assistant, Sarah, had been lost in a freak show accident years ago. He rarely spoke of it, the brief aside inspected out on the road. Could this be connected? Could these entities be responsible for the crew's disappearances, or Kane's descent into madness? The whispers, Eva said, her voice low and steady, fighting the rising tide of panic. The voices. They were trying to isolate us, to break us down. To make us vulnerable. She looked at the glowing handprint on the captain's chair, then at the pulsating chamber. The whispers had been a prelude, a psychological softening. Now, the true horror was revealing itself. Lena, meanwhile, had been meticulously scanning the chamber's interior. Eva, she said, her voice strained, there's a resonance frequency emanating from the entities. It's incredibly complex, almost musical. It's not just light, it's information. It's a signal. A signal. Eva repeated, her mind struggling to grasp the implications. Yes, Lena confirmed, her fingers flying across her scanner's interface. And it's broadcasting. Not just through electromagnetic waves, but through something else. Something that interacts directly with our neural pathways. That's how it's creating the illusions, the voices. It's manipulating our perceptions. Jack swore, his eyes wide with dawning realization. So it's not ghosts. It's aliens. Or something worse. I can't say for sure, Lena replied, her voice trembling. But this chamber, it's a conduit, a communication nexus. And whatever is on the other end of that signal, it's intelligent. And it's been here for a very long time. As if on cue, the luminescence in the chamber pulsed brighter, and the abstract forms within seemed to coalesce, their shifting shapes briefly resolving into something almost recognizable, fleeting glimpses of faces, distorted and contorted, yet disturbingly familiar. Eva saw the ghostly outline of her mother, her eyes wide with a silent plea. Anya saw her brother, Leo, his small hand reaching out. Silas saw Sarah, her expression one of profound sadness, before dissolving back into pure light. The whispers returned, no longer faint echoes, but a chorus of their deepest fears and regrets, amplified and distorted by the alien signal. You failed them, Eva. You should have saved him, Anya. You're alone, Silas. The psychic assault was relentless, designed to shatter their resolve. We need to get out of here, Jack said, his voice tight with a fear he could no longer mask. But Eva knew they couldn't. Not yet. The handprint, the disappearances, the shifting biology, the signal, it was all connected. And if Lena was right, if this chamber was a nexus of some kind of alien intelligence, then understandably was their only chance of survival. The promise of salvage had vanished, replaced by a terrifying imperative. To unravel the mystery of Kalta Station before it unraveled. The faint, unsettling luminescence from the sealed chamber was no longer a curiosity, it was a harbinger of a cosmic horror that had been patiently waiting in the silence of the void. The true unsettling discovery had only just begun. The station wasn't just dead, it was dormant, and it was awakening. And the silence, now, was filled with its alien song. The unsettling luminescence from the open chamber continued to cast an otherworldly glow, painting the corridor in hues of amethyst and spectral blue. Eva's words, though an attempt at reassurance, did little to dispel the growing sense of dread that permeated the small group. They had found something, yes, but it was a discovery that had merely peeled back another layer of an unfathomable horror, revealing a truth far more terrifying than any ghost story or phantom whisper. The very air seemed to thrum with an alien consciousness, a presence that was not merely observing them, but actively interacting with their environment. Jax, ever the pragmatist even in the face of cosmic anomaly, took a cautious step back from the glowing aperture. Alright, so we've got a light show that rearranges rooms and potentially talks to us through our dead relatives. Standard Tuesday for us, I guess. But this is beyond any derelict salvage protocol I've ever read about. This is actively hostile architecture. He scanned the corridor around him, his helmet's internal sensors pinging for any structural anomalies, any hidden compartments, any sign that the station itself was a predator. He'd seen ship AI go rogue, seen automated defenses misfire, but this was different. This felt organic, alive, and impossibly ancient. The notion of the station being a single, massive biomechanical organism, as Lena had posited, was no longer a wild scientific speculation. It was a creeping, visceral reality. Anya, usually the most grounded of the team, found herself staring intently at the corridor ahead. Her gaze was fixed on a section of the bulkhead that had been, mere moments ago, a solid, unremarkable expanse of reinforced alloy. Now, however, a door was there. A heavy, metallic aperture that had definitely not been present when they entered this section of the station. Its outline was sharp, defined, as if it had simply materialized from the very structure of the ship. Jax, she said, her voice barely a whisper, that door, it wasn't there before. Jax's head snapped around, his attention drawn from the glowing chamber. He followed Anya's gaze, his breath catching in his throat. She was right. A new doorway, perfectly integrated into the surrounding plating, stood where solid wall had been. It was sealed, its surface as featureless as the rest of the corridor, but its presence was undeniable, a stark testament to the impossible. What the? He approached it slowly, his hand instinctively reaching for the sidearm holster in his hand. He ran his gloved hand over the cool wood. No seam, no latch, no decided to manifest a new exit. Lena, her scanner still whirring with data from the chamber, looked up, her brow furrowed with concentration. Structural integrity scans show no recent breaches or modifications in this area, she reported, her voice laced with a disquieting mix of scientific curiosity and growing fear. The plating is consistent with the rest of the station's original construction. But, there's a localized energy distortion. A subtle ripple, like a gravitational lensing effect, but on a much smaller scale. It's highly localized, centered directly on that door. She zoomed in her scanner's display. It's like the station is folding itself, rearranging its own spatial fabric to create new patterns. Eva, witnessing this impossible architectural shift, felt a cold dread begin to solidify in her stomach. The handprint on the captain's chair, Ade's fragmented logs about the crew changing, Lena's findings of constantly reconfigured biological matter. It was all part of a larger, terrifying mosaic. The station wasn't merely derelict, it was a sentient, evolving entity, capable of rewriting its own physical form. The implications were staggering. They weren't exploring a dead ship, they were trapped within a living, unpredictable labyrinth. Silas, his eyes wide and unfocused, stumbled back a step, his gaze darting from the new door to the pulsating chamber. "It's changing," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "It's always changing. Like a dream. You think you know where you are, and then, it shifts." His words carried the weight of a fractured memory, a chilling premonition of being lost in a reality that refused to remain constant. Jax, taking a deep, steady breath, tried to regain some semblance of control. "Okay, you go. So what? We bypassed tougher security systems with duct tape and wishful thinking. Lena, can you scan it? See if it leads anywhere, or if it's just more, decorative rearranging." Lena directed her scanner towards the new portal. The device whirred and beeped, its display flickering with complex readings. "The energy signature is different from the chambers," she reported. "It's not the pure, coherent energy of the entities. It's more akin to a localized gravitational manipulation. It's subtle, but the space beyond the door, it's not a direct continuation of this quality. It's warped. Twisted. As if reality itself has been compressed or expanded in that direction." She paused, a tremor in her voice. "My scanner is indicating a high probability of spatial distortion beyond the threshold. Entering could disorient us. Or worse." Before Jax could formulate a response, a low hum began to emanate from the new door. It started subtly, a faint vibration that ran through the deck plates, but quickly intensified, growing into a resonant thrum that seemed to penetrate their very bones. The polished metal of the door began to ripple, not like water, but like mercury under an unseen force. The outline of the door blurred, the sharp edges softening, merging with the surrounding bulkhead. It was as if the station was retracting its spontaneous creation, erasing its own impossible architecture. Anya gasped, pointing. "Look! The corridor." Jax followed her gaze, his eyes widening in disbelief. The section of the corridor that had contained the newly manifested door was no longer a corridor at all. The wall was solid, seamless, exactly as it had been before. The impossible door had vanished, as if it had never existed. Yet, the memory of it, the tangible feeling of its presence, remained as a stark testament to what had just occurred. The station had played with them, presented them with a new path, and then, with a casual indifference, reclaimed it. "No," Jax breathed, the pragmatism that had served him so well in the void of space beginning to falter. "No, that's not possible. I saw it. We all saw it." He ran his hand over the now solid wall, searching for any lingering trace of the aberration. There was nothing. Just cold, unyielding metal. Lena's voice was tight with a dawning horror. "It's not just the door, Jax. My readings, the spatial distortion signatures are fluctuating wildly. The corridor's configuration is unstable. It's as if the very geometry of this section of the station is in flux. It's not just rearranging doors, it's subtly altering its own fundamental dimensions. What we perceive as a straight corridor could be, in reality, something far more complex. It's actively manipulating our perception of space. Eva felt a wave of nausea wash over her. The implications were terrifying. If the station could so casually alter its own structure, if it could create and then erase pathways, then they were not merely exploring, they were trapped within a capricious, intelligent environment that could seal them in, open new routes to unknown dangers, or simply erase their path forward. The idea of being lost, truly and irrevocably lost, in a place that actively defied the laws of physics, began to take hold. This wasn't a salvage mission anymore, it was a fight for their sanity. It's like it's breathing, Silas murmured, his eyes wide and unseeing, fixed on the now solid wall. Shifting. Changing its shape. Always the same, but never the same. His words, born from his own trauma, seemed to echo the station's own unsettling nature. Jax finally broke the stunned silence. "All right," he said, his voice rough and strained. "All right. So, the station can play architectural Jenga with us. We've got the glowing energy, things, and a building that's trying to give us an existential crisis. What's our next move, Eva? Because I'm starting to feel like we're cockroaches in a cosmic ant farm, and the gardener is about to rearrange the whole damn habitat." Eva's mind raced. The encounter with the chamber and the subsequent spatial anomaly had confirmed their worst fears. The station was not merely holding secrets, it was an active participant in their presence. The carefully cataloged schematics they had were useless. The reality of Kalta Station was a fluid, ever-changing construct. Survival now depended on understanding the rules of this impossible game, if indeed there were any discernible rules. "We need to proceed with extreme caution," Eva stated, her voice firm, projecting a confidence she desperately tried to feel. "Lena, keep your scanners active. Monitor for any further spatial anomalies, any energy fluctuations. Jax, Silas, Anya, stay close. No one goes off on their own. We stick together, and we move deliberately. We can't predict what this place will do, but we can try to react to it as it happens." She glanced back at the open chamber, the pulsating light a constant, unnerving presence. That chamber, it's the source, or at least a significant part of it. We need to understand what those entities are, and what this station is doing. Jax nodded, his hand still resting on his weapon. "Understood. But if this place decides to turn this corridor into a solid block of something, or drop us into an airlock, I'm not going to wait for a formal invitation to blast my way out." His pragmatic fear was a healthy counterpoint to Eva's cautious resolve. Anya, her eyes still darting nervously around the corridor, spoke up. What if it's not just playing with us? What if it's trying to guide us? Or trap us? The thought hung in the air, a chilling possibility. "It's a fair question," Anya, Eva admitted. "But without knowing its intentions, any move could be a mistake. For now, we assume it's hostile, or at least indifferent to our well-being. Lena, any sign of that original log entry's location? Cade mentioned Sector Gamma. If we can find that, maybe we can get a clearer picture of when this all started." Lena adjusted her scanner's sensitivity. The station's internal designation for Sector Gamma is elusive. The schematics I have are outdated, or perhaps deliberately corrupted. It seems to be a non-standard designation, possibly a personal log of Captain Eva. However, there are tertiary research labs and atmospheric processing units located in the ship's deeper ventral sections. If Sector Gamma refers to a physical location, it would most likely be in that vicinity. "Ventral sections," Jax echoed, a grimace on his face. "Wonderful. That's usually where the really nasty stuff gets flushed out. Or where things go to die. Which, given our current circumstances, is probably an understatement. As they began to move, cautiously advancing down the corridor, the subtle shifts continued. A bulkhead that had seemed solid under Jax's touch now had a faint seam running through it, almost invisible unless you knew where to look. A light fixture that had been dead moments before flickered to life, casting a new, unsettling pattern on the floor. The station was alive, and it was making its presence known, not through grand, overt displays, but through 1,000 tiny, insidious alterations. The very fabric of their reality was being suddenly rewritten around them, a constant, unnerving reminder that they were trespassers in a space that was not merely mental, but occupied by a consciousness that perceived their presence as a minor, transient inconvenience, or perhaps, a source of amusement. The whisper of the void had become a symphony of impossible architecture, and they were its unwilling ornaments. The corridors of Kalta Station were no longer mere passageways, they were a testament